working with the local church to take the hope of Christ to every student in the United States. This is First Priority. Now here are your hosts, Steve Cherrico and Brad Stelling.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. My name is Steve Cherrico, and for those of you that are on the vidcast, you're my favorite people. My favorite people, because you get to see just my face today. You don't have to look at Brad Skelling, which is good fortune to you. Brad is out today, but we have decided to have on a dear, dear, good man, loves the Lord. I'm going to build him all up so he can tear it all down with his story. But Bryan Drake's going to be on with us today. Want to remind everybody, we are only a few weeks away from conference, so make sure you're praying about that. We are in the midst of campus life, so make sure that you're using the app and that you're telling your campus coaches to report. And if you are a campus coach or you are a student, please know, on this thing, we tell your story on a regular basis. In fact, as Draker begins to tell his story, I think I'm going to mix in a few that we've had locally in the last 3 days because there's just good story going on with kids on campus right now. And part of Bryan's story is about First Priority on campus. So without further ado, let me introduce my friend Bryan. Welcome, sir. How are you?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me. It's good seeing you again, brother.
It's good to see you. All I've seen is pictures and people with you. They're like, hey, we know Draker now. I'm like, I need to spend some time with the guy.
Yeah, that's how this came up. Was we had a show and pizza, and I was like, "Hey, you know these people?"
So good. So listen, I know a good bit of your story. I know a good bit of your cool job. Will you, for those, and I should break this down for you. We have three audiences that really are part of the podcast vidcast. Number one, there's now over 110 staff across the nation for First Priority.
Awesome.
Those guys and gals are killing it. They're my heroes. They're the ones that make it happen, right? But right below them is the campus coaches and the faculty sponsors that are really our volunteers on campus. And it's amazing how many of them are locking in because they just want to have every piece of the first party story they can.
Right.
And then Draker, this one's probably you. We have certain student leaders that are bought in. Hook, line, sinker, their mission field is their campus. And so they're surprisingly enough commenting and letting us know, hey, we're listening to this. So that's your three audiences, right? As you're thinking about it, all surround the campus. Tell them a little bit about who you are, what's God doing with you. Let's start there.
For sure. So my name, like I said, is Bryan Drake. I'm from Mobile, Alabama. I've been involved in First Priority since literally my freshman year in high school. And it had great results and for multiple reasons. I can talk about that in a little bit, but I'm a Christian illusionist. Yep, that sounds like an oxymoron, but no, my wife and I, we travel all over the country and we share the gospel doing these illusion shows. And what's really cool about it is we will get students in, especially our main target audience is, middle to high and then college and then whole church audience is kind of boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Those different audiences. But we will get students in who will come to hear the gospel who would never step foot in church, which is why I love First Priority so much, is that you're there doing the mission field on campus, whether you're part of the staff or whether you're part of one of the student leadership or anywhere in between is such a cool thing because peers reaching peers is definitely a passion of ours.
That's great, man. That's great. Now you mentioned a facet of your story. We'll get into that in a minute, but tell us about, you got wife and kids.
That's right.
You mentioned her. Tell us about that.
So Carla and I have been married for 17 years this past July. We've got a 10-year-old girl named Harper and a 6-year-old girl named Ella. And I just got to teach their Bible class this morning, which was a blast for me. I really love getting to do that. So they are wild. I'm pretty sure they have rabies, you know what I mean? Like legit, but they're so somebody said their children were feral last night. And I was like, yes, I know what that's like.
That's great. That is great. Is that it?
That's it.
Are those the ones? All right.
That's it. Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as I know, that's it for now.
Well, one of them is going to have to pick up the mantle at some point. I'm going to be excited to see that. That's going to be cool. Yes. So talk a little bit more Christian illusionist, right? That's not unfamiliar to those of us that are in the youth ministry world. But you have obviously walked into that uncomfortable side of that story, right? Mm-hmm. As well as the really cool side of that story, right? Tell us about how you decided, hey, that's really going to be the tag in terms of what God's called me to right now.
Yeah, so I was saved when I was 15 years old, back in all the way in 2003 or 2002, excuse me, and which I just aged me there, but. And then shortly after that, like as a high school student, I felt God calling me into full-time vocational ministry, which is horrifying in the South as a Southern Baptist kid, because it was like, you really only have one track. You're going to become a kids minister, then a youth pastor, and a pastor, and then you die. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, that's just not where I feel God's calling me to. And so I was a junior high youth pastor at the time, and like at 19 years old. It's a terrible idea. Don't do that. Not for anybody, but just for me. It was like, don't put this guy in
No,
charge.
it's just a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Yes. Keep going. That's so great.
So I had been getting interested into card tricks and stuff like that, just as, you know, it would come on TV with David Blaine and stuff like that. So I would go around my college campus. And then finally one night I was like, hey, wait a minute. I've got a captive audience on Wednesday nights who literally can't leave for an hour because their parents are in church, and I've got them. So I would just show them tricks, and they were terrible. Like, I was awful at it. But what's cool is like, God opened up doors so fast for us. It was almost mind blowing. Like, we had a guy show up at our church who our students had gone to their camp the year before, and I was just doing card tricks. Mid message, he just stops and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, aren't you that guy with the cards?" And I'm looking around like, he's got to be talking to me. And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "I want you to see me after this." I mean, just stops the whole message. I was like, okay. So he says, "Hey man, why don't you come out, you and your wife, and do our camps? Do, you know, like, come do shows at our camps?" I was like, sure, you know, and we had never done a show before. It was like
amazing.
Yeah, it was great. One funny, really quick story was one guy who was there that year at that camp. He booked us later on, you know, 5 or 6 years ago. And I was telling him that story because I knew he was there. And he goes, wait, that was you? I said, yeah. He goes, bro, I would not have booked you if I'd have known that was you. Yes. So we did really well that first year, apparently. Made an impact.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. So you've been on the road recently. I know that because you've been in some places where we have mutual friends. Tell us what the Lord is doing with it right now.
Yeah, so we had a little bit of a slower fall this year than normal, but we had a really productive spring, and then we've got a later fall, winter coming up that's looking really great. But basically, what's really cool is we're finally, since 2020, we really haven't been able to do many public school assemblies, and what we do with those is student pastor will bring us in. And we'll go to whichever high school they have a good association with, whether it's First Priority there, or they just go and do ministry on campus. We'll do a public school assembly. Hey, make good choices, stay in school, you matter, kind of those kind of message. And what's always been really great is the school will always give us permission to say, hey, if you want to come over tonight to such and such church or this place at 7:00. It's been really great. So we're finally getting to do some more of those again, which we've been getting to do even the last couple of weeks in Georgia and Louisiana and stuff like that. So it's been really cool. But typically we're on the road about 120 days a year. Some of that is, 3-4 shows a day. Some of that is, pure travel days. Like, we went to Calgary last year, and it was like, this took 8 hours to get to Calgary. I didn't even know it was a real place except for Bret Hart and the wrestler. That's all I knew about it.
Yes, that's great. That is great. And not unusually, but your wife travels with you.
Yeah. So what's really cool about the show is that she is the other half of it. Now, she doesn't talk. It's not like a Penn and Teller thing where she comes out and like pantomimes, but she does a lot of stuff backstage that makes the effects we do look like one person tricks, which makes our stuff stronger illusion wise. But it means that it frees me up to just talk or do something on stage. And she's done some crazy sleight of hand that nobody notices, which makes it even more insane. But she comes up with a lot of our routines as well, which is really, really cool. Like, one of our closers, and some of you have probably seen this, we have bags on stools on stage, and one of them has a knife, right? Well, I had a method for it. Like, we were going on to do a conference years ago, and I said, hey, this is just not going to work. And we're like 30 minutes away from going on stage with this routine. She goes, what if we just do this? I was like, that's a great idea. Yeah, let's do that. And now it's been one of our closers for years now. So she's really got a creative mind for things like that. She just doesn't like talking on stage. And people are like, so what do you do exactly? And I'm like, there's a laundry list of things that you just won't see, because that's the whole intention for her in her mind.
So cool. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the knife one. I'm not a fan.
Neither's my mom.
You know what my brain is doing. My brain is going to the worst possibility.
That's right.
This is going to be Drake. This is going to be a bad day for Drake, or it's not going to go.
Yeah, they'll call me Lefty from that point on. It's just not
exactly. Exactly. It's so good. All right, so I do want to dig in, because one of the unique things about you is that you were involved with First Priority, and really you and your wife, I mean, kind of a neat story in the midst of
Mhm.
it. Do you mind sharing just a little piece of
Yeah,
that story?
absolutely.
Okay.
So I got to high school. I had been in a private Christian school pretty much my entire life, and it just wasn't. It was, theologically, all that stuff was a great fit, but it just wasn't a good fit socially for me. So my parents were like, okay, you know what, public school, a lot of people down where you live, so let's try this. So I go in, strong believer already, but I find out that First Priority is there, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. But apparently, I didn't know this either. Maybe from like a See at the Pole or something the year before, whatever it was happened the year before was really great, because from that point on, not every week, not every month, every day, the students from First Priority would meet at the flagpole in front of the school. It was so cool. I was like, man, this is great. We got believers out here. And so I just walked up, and, I've never been shy, as Carla will tell you. It's kind of how I asked her on our first date, but, never been shy. And I see, I see Carla, never met her before. She's holding hands with this guy. And I was like, that girl's really pretty. This is what I thought. And so, so they broke up. And then, long story short, I started to be like, hang out with her a lot more. And I was like, hey, and so we essentially met at First Priority, and all of our first memories are because of First Priority, which is really cool. Like I said, not shy. Carla being shy, I thought this was a great idea. We're walking between classes, and, there's 100 students out there, and I just yell at the top of my lungs, hey Carla, it's the last chance to go to homecoming with this guy. She completely ignored me, like walked right past me, looked at me, and just kept walking. I was like, oh, that didn't work. Now I say it didn't work, but for those of you on video, you can see it did work for
It
17
did
years.
work.
Granted, I had to apologize and grovel and ask nicely and act like a normal human being, but it's cool, man. So we're always thankful for First Priority as an organization, just getting believers to not be afraid of their faith on campus, and not just live it out in the sense of, hey, I'm a Christian, but hey, let me use this as a mission field for the students around me. I love that about it.
Yeah, it's really good. All right, you're starting to talk to our audiences a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. So I'm going to ask you I'm going to throw you some softballs, ask you some
Yeah.
loaded questions. So you've got a group of next generation leaders, campus coaches. They're bought into the campus. That's where their volunteer time
Mm-hmm.
is, right? What's one or two? I was going to say the one thing, right? But what's one or two things that you're like, hey, because I travel, because I have a little bit more of a global perspective, here's what I'm seeing about you right now. How would you
Yeah.
encourage that group of people?
One thing is just because the generational gap and things have changed so much, even just in how students relate to us while we're on stage. I mean, it's so different than even when we first started, but is to not get discouraged based on a reaction of students. Students are, as a whole, shyer face to face than they used to be, one on one and things like that. It's a little different. So, maybe those personal interactions aren't as, if you've been doing this for 5, 10 years, you've seen the difference in students. You go, oh man, they're just not as engaged as they used to be. And that may be true on the outside or on the surface level, but really those students are, they're messaging you. They're really involved and bought in. So not to let those kind of things discourage you. But one thing that I've really loved seeing is those student leaders, or the leadership who is there, being able to pour into students to make leaders of students. Because something I say in the show all the time, and I said it one time by accident, and I thought about it. I was like, oh no, this is legit. Is that, hey, I'm going to get on a plane tomorrow and I'm going to go home. Your youth pastor is not sitting in algebra class with you. Your first party leader, the non-student leader, is not going to be sitting in your PE class, and you're going to get hit with that question of, hey, why are you always at church? Why are you always doing that? Why are you doing that first priority thing? Hey, how come you just experienced this horrible tragedy in your life and you're not tearing down the walls and burning things down? How is that the thing? And if your first response is to go, you tell them, well, that person may not be there. So I love seeing pouring into student leaders from the people who are there on campus more than I am, or you. I mean, you do a lot, but you're obviously in so many different areas. Those people who are there, day in, day out, or at least week in, week out, or month in, month out, is such a powerful thing. But just not to get discouraged by. And the other thing, sadly, is we face a lot of, I mean, I know First Party's got such an amazing reputation, but it doesn't matter. In some school systems, in some places, there's always opposition to the gospel. And so not to let those things bother you to the point of making that combative response that I so often want to do sometimes. So that was a word salad, but that's just kind of some observations I've had recently in being around students.
Yeah, so I'll tell a story now because you set me up really well. So you know that I oversee Nashville, Tennessee, as that's my area is Middle Tennessee. but then I also get to serve Northeast Tennessee and Cincinnati. So those are kind of the regions I'm in. Those are where my people are, right?
Right.
Here in Middle Tennessee, we have a kind of a staff feed that we keep each other updated on. Last year, we had a principal at a school that students were trying to launch their club. Like everything was legit. Students launching the club, the adult being invited in by the students. Like when you go buy the book, it was by the book.
Right.
And the principal that was there was absolutely, we're not starting a faith-based club. We're not starting a faith-based club, which, as you and I know, is illegal.
Right.
Illegal. You like if you have one, you have to have all of them, good or bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but she stood on the stance. I'm not going to start any new. That's how I'm going to solve this, right?
Right.
Kids pretty frustrated because there was a pretty large group of kids. And our coaches said, tell you what, we got two options here. We can either take offense or we can just lay it at the feet of Jesus and just be patient. Well, I don't know about you, man. That's not my general nature is not, oh, I'll just be patient with this one. No, the students have rights. They need to, right? That's my nature. But okay, if that's the way the coaches are going to go, great. So I got a text feed this week and it said, I got great news about that campus. That principal was removed this year, and a principal from one of the other campuses came over where First Priority has thrived for the last 5 years. Kids have come to Christ. Kids have found transformation. Kids are getting plugged into like all the things that you want out of First Priority Club have happened. Well, that principal is now the principal at that new school.
That's
so
awesome.
They launched this week.
Oh my gosh, man.
What we are seeing, Bryan, and I don't know if you're seeing this. Hopefully this is a softball for you too. What we are seeing across the nation is the COVID thing you're talking about where students are interacting different.
Right.
It's unfair to blame it on COVID.
Sure.
Screens have been a problem for a while, but that's what we all do, right? Where students are interacting and reacting different. There's starting to be a shift.
Yes.
And they're starting to say, hey, I don't really need you to define my truth. I need you to tell me truth. Tell me the gospel. Share with me good news. And then let me go ahead and begin to work it out like you would in discipleship, right?
Yes.
Like you would creating a leader. And so our clubs are starting with 20 kids, and a week later, they're like on the app, hey, we need a new room. We're at 42 students, and this room only holds 36.
Yeah.
You're only in week 3.
That's
what are you talking about, man? So there is this hunger thing we are realizing, and this is a global message, but us from Middle Tennessee for sure. There's this hunger thing going on inside students that really feeling that is a big deal right now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That too. No, I absolutely agree. I was just at a recent thing. It was a different organization was talking about their student groups and stuff like that, and they're having the same issue in a good way. They're exploding, and again, I'm not sure where culturally or where that's come from, but there's been a shift back from. We had the Richard Dawkins like new atheist movement for a long time. Yeah. Then we had the Your Truth movement, and now it's the I'm tired of the superficial of whatever you want to believe is fine. I need what's true, because what's true for you or me or whatever doesn't change my life. I need something concrete that changes my life, and I've seen that, and I don't know what it is. I don't know where it comes from. Obviously, the Holy Spirit, but it's us being able to go, okay. Jesus was not kidding, and it's still applicable today when he says the fields are plenty, the workers are few. Let's get at it, right? And those workers involve us on this level, students, and then student leaders, and then leadership right there. I mean, it involves all of us being willing to go. I tell a story in the show because it blew my mind one time. And it's got, if you got a few seconds here, I'll tell it. This girl comes up to me after the show. She says, "Hey, Bryan, I had a good time at your show today." I say, "Cool." She said, "No, I gave my life to Jesus." I said, "Oh, that's awesome." She said, "But listen, let me tell you my story where I was 1 week ago." And I always hesitate when I start this story because a lot of people think, "Oh, this is probably just something he saw somewhere, read somewhere." This girl says to me verbatim, "Bryan, 1 week ago, I was in a hospital on suicide watch." And she said, "But I found," this is the sentence I'll never forget. She said, "But I found out there were people in my life who cared about me enough. They brought me to the hospital, and they brought me here, and I heard about Jesus." And she said, "I no longer even want to take my life. I've been given new life." And obviously she had follow-up and stuff there. But the question that's haunted me since, and I've shared this story for years now with this question, what if there weren't people in her life who said, you know what, this is going to be time out of my day. It might cost a little money. It might be an irritation. She may text me in the middle of the night with questions or emotions or whatever. And yet all of those things may have entered their minds. They said, you know what, all of that is worth it to reach this person with the gospel. And I love hearing that. And I'm so encouraged that there are people doing that, going, you know what, I've counted the cost. The cost may be time, effort, emotion, whatever. but it's worth it for the gospel.
Yeah, it's so interesting bringing it up because as you just started talking about your shows earlier, I was
Mm-hmm.
reminded of True Blood's research from a couple of years ago that he shared out at SLU or YPS, wherever it was. But
Mm-hmm.
he just talked about how the third voice is that voice that really is the determining factor on whether or not a student walks out of high school and into something that is Bible professing, spirit believing, like that third voice, that person who says, I'm not your mom or your dad,
Mm-hmm.
but I love you and believe in you even in the midst of your mess.
Right.
And so it's going to cost me time. It's going to cost me effort, right? It's going to cost me even some treasure, but
Mm-hmm.
it's so worth it. And when we find students that have that other voice, and then they have a mission like an FP or an FCA, or then
Mm-hmm.
we don't care what you call it around here, right? If
Right.
they have a mission, which is their school campus, or if they have a mission, which is an orphanage over in Africa, all of a sudden you
Yeah.
started to put some pieces together where that student walks out and goes, it was my parents' faith. It has become my faith.
Yes.
And now I'm going to experience transformation in the next part of my life. So let me set you up again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got a group of students in the room that are on fire for their campus. But like students are, they're better admitting it than we are.
Right.
They are broken. They are hurting. They make stupid mistakes on a regular basis because they are teenagers working
Right.
things out, right? They're just better at telling it that they do it than we are currently because we're
Mm-hmm.
older and we think we got it all together and we don't, right?
That's
But
right.
they're better at it, okay? So you
Mm-hmm.
got that group of students in a room, right?
So that I'm reading a book by Dane Ortland right now called Gentle and Lowly, and it deals with the fact that our first inclination is when we mess up and when we screw up or something like that, is that we think Jesus looks at us like the little boy reaching for the slug, kind of just barely just not wanting to touch it. But it says the heart of Jesus is gentle and lowly, open arms. And so yes, we are going to screw up. I was that high schooler who was on fire in first priority, and yet the teacher's like, you're going into ministry? Because I was a loudmouth. I was an idiot. I would do stupid stuff all the time. And yet you have two choices. You can let that deter you and go, well, I'm done. God can't use me. Or you can go, hey, wait a minute. God's grace is sufficient in this moment, in the next moment, in the moment I haven't even thought of messing up in. God's still good, and his sovereign grace is so good in that situation. So yeah, hey, really, students, you are going to mess up. You're going to do dumb stuff. Your prefrontal cortex hasn't even formed completely yet. So yeah, it's coming. But you have two choices. Do you just go, oh, that moment or that choice or that issue is what defines me? Or no. God's grace and I am his child is what defines me. And once you come to grips with that and go, yes. Now it's, again, like Paul says, it's not a license to go out and sin and go like, oh no, we're good. I can just do whatever. No, but it should be the encouraging impetus to go, hey, yes, I may mess up. I may not be the perfect witness that I thought I was going to be when I said yes to Jesus. But that's not what defines me. His goodness, his grace, his love is what defines me. And you need that too. And I think that honesty helps other people realize, oh, wait a minute. It's not about being some hypocrite. It's not about being some double standard. It's not about a Sunday walk and a Tuesday night walk. This is all one thing, and we're working through what it means to be sanctified and be closer to Jesus, to where at the end of our lives, when we're 85, we should look back and that trajectory should be a lot closer by the time we die than we are when we start out. I mean, look at examples from scripture. I mean, Peter was the guy who walked with Jesus daily, and he cut off the dude's ear trying to fight. He's the one who said, hey, Jesus, I'll never deny you. I'll go wherever you go. Can you imagine that cold sweat when Jesus turns and looks at Peter in one of the Gospels, and he looks at him right after he says, I don't even know who he is. I bet his like goosebumps and hairs were standing up. And yet what happens? Peter goes, that doesn't define me. Jesus is what defines me. And he goes on and lives the rest of his life serving. So, I mean, yeah, we'll mess up. Don't let that define you. Let God's goodness define you.
Yeah, you draw me to the scripture from our staff Devo yesterday, which is Ephesians 2:8. For his
Mm-hmm.
by grace you've been saved through faith. It is not of yourself. It is a gift of God, not by works, so you can't boast. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do.
That's it.
In the midst of all of our brokenness, he's still saying, I got people.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I don't need you to be perfect.
Right.
I need you to chase me. It's by my grace that you get to do this stuff. Gosh, that's good, Bryan. So good, man.
Yeah. No, it's exciting, man, because For people like us, it's easy to get frustrated when the negatives come and ignore the small stories of good things. And then when you hear about students leading their friends to Christ, it's like, man, why aren't we as excited about that as we are for like the court case that came down or what? It's like, man, no, that's what it's
Yeah.
all about. And I think that I think also this is something I've discovered is that for the general Christian, especially Nashville and us in Mobile, we have a lot of cultural Christianity. And I think there's a true, sad, subconscious belief that you see someone who's broken, doesn't know the Lord. And our minds go, yeah, well, Jesus can change anybody. But we don't put out the effort that tells us or that really believes, oh no, Jesus can change everybody. In our voice, we say, yes, you can be changed. But in our minds, we go, but not that guy or not that girl. And it's one of those things where maybe that's what stops us from pursuing is we really don't believe it. And then we are that person. I mean, that's the real truth is that no, we don't all have the same testimony of X, Y, and Z, but our brokenness, right before that, in Ephesians 2, it talks about how dead we were in our trespasses. And then it says the two best words in the New Testament, but God. It's like, man, that changes everything.
It's good, man. That's so good. Well, you gave us just a little glimpse as we get ready to land this plane. Tell us a little bit about what the Lord's doing in your heart as you move out into the fall and into the winter. And you talked about the campus a little bit. Like, just give us an idea of what the Lord's doing with you as we begin to button this up.
Yeah, so it's been an exciting time in our life, but also just a crazy time because I started back seminary as well for multiple reasons. One of the things, and I was a terrible student in college. Like, I'm trying to be a better student. Like I got my first 100 on a quiz. Like, yeah, this is great. But the reason is because I'm getting master's divinity with marriage and family counseling, and there's twofold reason. We're not leaving this ministry. This is our heart. This is our ministry of using the arts, using creativity, and that's something I would encourage students to. Is you all have gifts, talents, abilities that you may view as insignificant in the greater things, in the greater scheme, but God has given you those gifts, talents, and abilities for the kingdom. You hear about people who are like, well, I'm really good at video games. What can God do with that? Well, why not do a tournament and invite all the students, do a game night, and then have somebody share the gospel and do a quick Devo. You think, well, wait, anyway. But so I'm doing that. And what I've realized over this time of talking to students, talking to their parents, talking to leaders is that, man, my skills of being able to give good godly wisdom in the moment are something I would love to brush up on. And so having that master's divinity with the marriage and family counseling deals with that aspect of good biblical counseling, good biblical advice and wisdom for students who are struggling with questions of what's God's will in my life, or hey, I mean, as we see, students' mental health crisis is through the roof, and it's not getting better right now. So I would love that. So that's one aspect. So whether we're in a hotel room, recently I was just in a hotel room on the way to an event and doing my classes, or whether we're at home doing that, but also going, okay, how can we continue to be the best at what we do on the art side with never watering down the mission and the ministry? Because at the end of the day, if someone says, hey, we want to bring you in to do a cool illusion show, don't worry about sharing the gospel, or we're just going to have a fun night, not even a church or something secular. I'm like, no thanks. I don't want to leave my children with grandma just to come do that. It's all about the mission. And so we're excited. And in this time of us being a little slower for August, September, we have come up with some new effects and things like that, and some new tweaks even to how we communicate the gospel in the show. Because again, it's not about us. It's not about what we say. God can use any of us, right? We are expendable in that sense of it. It's not about, hey, if you don't have Bryan, I mean, you're missing an ace player. It's not about that at all.
Yeah.
But we always want to be good stewards of the time, the gifts, and the opportunities that we have to share the gospel. So one of the things we've been doing is coming up with new routines and things like that, just to continue to draw people in who may not come to church or may not come to an event, just so they can hear the gospel through a fun, unique evening. And then also connecting them with local leaders, which is why I love First Priority so much, is that when we do go away, if we're in Ohio one night, we're in Georgia the next night, those local leadership at their school through First Priority, at their church, at their student ministry, are going to be right there with them, following up and discipling them. And I love that so much.
So good. Cherrico, you're 1 in 7 billion. You're a good dude. You're a good dude. I'm so glad that we met. What? It's got to be 13 years ago or something.
I think
like
so.
That
Yeah.
at the bowl.
I think that's right. Yeah, it's got to be, because I don't think we had kids yet at all.
Corbin, Kentucky.
That's right, baby. Oh man,
Arena. Remember the
I,
arena?
I do. I do.
I remember trying to share the gospel in the arena thinking these people are going to shoot me.
She said, shoot or eat me, because I heard the word Ewans and I said, what did she just say to me? She said Ewans. I was like, is that like our y'all? She's like, yes, that's y'all. I was like, okay, thank you.
Amazing. Poor Bargo. He lives with it every day.
Old Tim Bar.
So good. Well, dude, I am truly grateful for you and your bride and the work you guys do. I'm so glad we run into mutual friends on the road.
Yes.
Obviously, when you get to Nashville, I want us to have a slushie and hang out together.
100%.
And with that note, friends, thanks so much for joining us for the podcast vidcast. If you enjoyed listening, if you have some comments, please comment, please like, please share. And Bryan, they need to know how to get on to see your stuff on WebLife, on socials. How do they find all that?
Yeah, so we were done when it came to Facebook. We have the Bryan Drake Show on Facebook. Everywhere else is just Bryan Drake Show, Bryan Drake Show. Looks like Bryan Drake Show. It is not. It is Bryan Drake Show. So make sure to follow us on there. We always post where we're going to be, and you can come check it out. If you heard us here, come tell us at a show, hey, I heard you on the podcast. We'd love to chat more with you about that.
That's awesome. Thanks, man. Friends, don't forget us to give that 5-star review. And until next week when we get on the big cast again,